Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on Capture One sessions and how to get the most out of those, and importantly, how to understand them as well. If this is your first webinar, so you know who you're listening to, my name is David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. Today we have 60 minutes to share with each other. We might not need the whole 60 minutes. The session concept is actually very simple, which I hope you will agree with me by the end of today's session. You are very welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. Some of you have already been doing that, which is why I was a little bit late starting, so thanks for that. If you look at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see a box that says questions. Put a question in there that will pop up straight through to me. If you're on your iOS device or Android device, again, there's a question mark icon on the screen. Tap that and it will come straight through to me as well. I am recording the session too. Don't feel you have to remember everything. You can watch the webinar again and all the previous webinars on our YouTube playlist. If you look out for a follow-up email in 1 or 2 days' time, then you'll find that YouTube link on there, and then you can watch this one again at your leisure. Okay, let's move on to Capture One. So let me just give me a second while I change swap screens over and get Capture One up on the main screen. So you should be seeing Capture One right now. A couple of new things, nothing to do with Capture One as such, but mouse locator, just to help you see the mouse highlighted like so. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, if I do a keystroke, like say, for example, G to hide my window, you can see that keystroke pop up in the left-hand side, just to give you an idea of what shortcuts are being used, as obviously it's often hard to follow. Okay, let's move on to sessions. Now, sessions are extremely simple and one way of managing your files in Capture One. We're looking at a Capture One catalog right now. That's a different way of storing your images. There's various different pros and cons to each. A catalog, just to say in brief, is very good at giving you a complete overview of all your photographic work. A session is more suited to working with your images on a project by project basis. So if you shoot tethered in the studio, a session makes a lot of sense. If you're out and about shooting landscapes on the weekends and so on, and you really want to kind of keep an overview of all your work, then a catalog probably makes more sense. Or you can do a combination of the two, which we get to a little bit later on. So what we're going to do is we're going to do two different session workflows. We do a very simple session workflow, and then we do one which is a bit more complicated. Or complicated is not the right word, because you shouldn't actually think of a session as complicated. It can be very simple or it can be very powerful. So it's up to you. So we'll do it in its most simplest cut down sense, and then we'll up the ante a bit and invoke some of the more powerful features that you could do with the session. So very simple. First of all, we're just going to say file new session like so, and we get this pop-up window. Where do we want to have our session? First of all, we need to give our session a name. So let's just call this webinar AM like so. And where do we want to store the session itself? If we look over here, there's a little button with 3 dots, and then we can decide where we want to put the session. So I'm just going to put it by default in the pictures folder. Other than that, we're going to leave everything else as set to default. So let's just say OK. And our new session will pop up like so. Let's just close down this catalog in the background. We can always come back to that if we need it later on. So now we have a brand new empty session. It doesn't look like anything much in particular right now. If we look what we've actually created itself, then you can see that we've got 4 different folders and something called the co-session DB, or Capture One session database, basically. There's a couple of you saying that you couldn't hear me. Bad sound quality now. We should be okay. There's nothing that is going on this end that I can tell. Persevere. We should be all right with sound if sound okay for me. Okay, if you're having a slight sound issue, nothing I can do right now at this end. You'll probably find it will clear. It is a little bit dependent on your internet download speed. So bear with us. Hopefully it will clear. Okay, so where was I? So this is what we create in our session. We have a capture folder, we have an output folder, selects folder, and trash folder. And we have this, which I said is the co-session DB, which basically stores everything that we need to know about this particular session, which you'll see in a minute. So how do we use a session in its most simplest sense? Well, first of all, we need to get some images into our session. Now you can just simply drag and drop stuff into the capture folder if you wish. Capture One will pick it up and so on, but if you want to kind of follow the right protocol and get the most advantages, it makes sense to use the import dialog. And I'm going to think of the scenario that you've come back from a trip or whatever, you've shot some images to a memory card, and we're going to import from a memory card. Just so we know that everything is kind of as you would do it in real life. Yes, a couple of you are asking about EIP. I will explain what EIP is all about as well. So let's get some images into this session so we can start to work. So top left, you'll see the import icon, or you can say File, Import Images, up to you. Excuse me. So I'm going to pick some images. Let's just go to the first item in the import dialog. Let's just select a folder. I'm not going to import a bunch of stuff because we don't want to sit here looking at progress bars. So we just grab a small folder of 20 odd images here called Italy and say open. So now we've got a bunch of images like so. Obviously, if you'd shot some images to a memory card and you put the memory card in whilst Capture One is running, it pops up automatically in the import window. So you don't even have to think about that. So we're going to import from location, and the next part is where do we want to import to? Where do we want to store the files? By default, they go into the capture folder, which is the capture folder of our session. This one right here. Subfolder, I'm going to delete this. This is for our part 2 where we get a bit more involved. So right now we're simply going to import 22 images into our capture folder like so. You've got some more options here, like you can create a backup of the raw files, just a simple backup to a different location. We can rename them if we wish. I've just got it set to image name. If we click on an image, you'll see it will give an example. If you want to rename, you can simply add different tokens in this section. And you can choose the tokens by clicking on the 3 dots here. And then you can drag and drop various different tokens up into this point to rename the files. We'll get into tokens a bit more when we look at the second stage. You can add some basic metadata. We can add some adjustments if you wish in the form of a Capture One style or preset. A Capture One style is basically a collection of various different adjustments in tools. A preset is from one particular tool itself. You can pick your either built-in styles, which come with Capture One by default, or you've got various built-in presets, for example. User presets and built-in presets. I have one which I use occasionally, which is some basic metadata like my name, address, copyright, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's import everything. So we've got import all down the bottom here. You can say eject card, you can say erase images after copying. I never do either of those two things. Just what if something went wrong during the copy process, you had a power cut, whatever. There's so many variables that could happen. The cat comes along and steps on your computer and ejects a card or whatever. It's just not worth the hassle. So let's say import all, and then the images will start popping into the capture folder like so. Happens pretty fast, as you can see. Just copy across, import completed successfully, and away we go. Now, if we go back to our session, you can see in the capture folder, we've got our images popping in there as well, like so. Eric was asking file info. That's just a section in the import window. If you click on an image, for example, it gives you some basic data about it, time and date of capture, and so on. That's all. So now we've got our images into our session as such. So 23 images into the capture folder, like so. Now at this point, we can obviously think about what do we want to do next. Do we want to go straight into opening images and starting to adjust them and so on? Do we want to go through like a little culling selection process and so on? Just to explain what's going up here in the top left, this is the library tool tab, and this is how you manage your session as such. Excuse me. So you've got shortcuts to the current capture folder, selects folder, output folder, and trash folder. We've got some albums, which we can come to in a minute, and we've got some favorites, which we can come to in a minute. You don't really have to use any of this if you use the session in its most basic sense. Down here, system folders. This allows you to browse the entire system if you wish. But the easiest thing to do, if you want to physically see where images are, if you right click up here, you can say show in system folders, like so, and then it will pop this open and show you where it is in your system folder. So you can see the path here: pictures, webinar AM, capture, output, selects, trash. You see they have an icon on the right hand side. Capture icon, output icon, it's a little cog, selects trash, selects folder, and trash icon, like so. Mark's saying, what if you've already used some pics on your hard drive and want them into Capture One? Well, it depends how you want to do it, Mark, really. If they're already on your hard drive and you want to use a session, you could copy them into the capture folder or move them into the capture folder. It sounds like you might be more suited to using a catalog. If you want to see a comparison of sessions versus catalog, there is an older webinar which does just that. So that might be something that you want to watch. As I said, a session is kind of well suited to a project by project basis, as opposed to getting an overview of all your images in one hit. You can actually use the system folders just to browse your entire system, but then you lose the benefit of working in a session, which hopefully you'll see as time ticks on. So I spoke a little bit about how can we use these other folders. So what about using the selects folder? So if we want to kind of go through all our images, let's make them a bit bigger and pick sort of out some selects. You can do various things, like you can drag and drop to your selects folder, like so. Just to tell you, this is a physical move to the selects folder, so you can see that image now pops into the selects folder. So as I said, it can just be a simple drag and drop to the selects folder. That can be single images, like so, or it could be a group of images. If we say we did like a shift select to get a few images and drag them to the selects folder, that works. And again, if we click on the selects folder, that shows me the selects that I have brought across. We can do it a different way, that we can use a keyboard shortcut if you prefer that. So if you look under File, Move All Selected Variants to Selects Folder. So if I click on this image, for example, and do Command J, then that moves it to the selects folder. Command J, once again, that moves it to the selects folder, like so. So now if we look at our session, we've got all our captures and all our selects in here. Excuse me. If we physically want to delete an image, let's say the coffee mug is pretty boring. If we do Command Backspace, that puts it into the trash folder. But again, you've got to get out of jail card. So for example, if you decide, well, actually, that wasn't a boring image, I could just take that back in. Incidentally, you can actually drag and drop stuff around in the Finder, and Capture One will just update. So if I put this back into the captures folder, and we go to my captures folder, you can see it's updated in the background, like so. So you can freely use the Finder to move stuff around if you wish as well. But visually, it's simply easier to do it in the in Capture One itself. So now we've got our basic selects. Now, if you want to, you can empty the trash folder, or let's just throw that back in trash, Command Backspace. If you want to, you can empty the trash folder. You can just right click and say empty session trash. Then it is gone forever. So if, like me, you're terrified of deleting anything, then I just tend to leave stuff in the trash folder. You never know when a deleted image might actually turn out to be useful. So if you've got enough hard drive space, I don't tend to delete a great deal. So if we go to our selects folder, you can now see we've got various images in here, which again, we can either go through more selection process, which we'd do in the next level when we go to sort of hardcore sessions. At the moment, we just keep it simple and use this with the selects folder. So now we could go through a process of taking the various images, of course, and making adjustments and so on and so forth. Today isn't really about adjusting, so we're not going to really spend much time on that, but we could just do speed adjustment as such, just so that we've got something that looks a little bit different. So let's just go through and do some speedy adjustments, which I'm not going to talk about. Let's just, whoops. Let's do a quick straighten, for example. Maybe too much. Just bring that back a bit. Here, let's fix our levels. Incidentally, always have a look at the levels tool in case you can make some improvements with that. And again, can't seem to be able to keep a camera straight these days. So that's a bit better. Let's just improve that, have a bit of clarity, bit of structure as well. That's probably overexposed, not too bad. Again, and so on and so forth. This is actually a good example of where levels works. It looks really flat and sort of milky because the sun was kind of in the wrong place. So let's just bump that up a bit, pull in the levels, adjust the midtones, bit of clarity, and that's just 2 adjustments which make the image a whole lot better than it was before. And finally, let's just bring that back up. So we've done some basic adjustments in Capture One. And let's think at this point what I'd like to get my exports out. Oh, before we move on to exports, let's just clear up the actual session structure, a couple of other folders that have popped in there. So you see that obviously in each of our, currently we've got capture and selects like so. There's a little folder called Capture One. This actually stores all the adjustments that we've made on those images. So as I just quickly blasted through those and made some adjustments, they're actually held in those folders there. So it's important that you just keep that folder where it is. It's not doing any harm. It doesn't take up much space. So it's just sitting alongside the images like so. Now, a couple of you asked about EIP. What's the point of EIP? You'll see that in Capture One Preferences. Under Image, I think Packers EIP when importing, and it's a sessions only thing. All that EIP does is essentially roll all the adjustments into a package itself that says EIP. Now, the only benefit of EIP is that if you want to send an image to, say, somebody else, like a retoucher or a client, and they want to open it up in Capture One and see all the adjustments that you did yourself. That's the purpose of EIP. It makes a raw file transportable from place to place. If you're not using EIP, there's nothing to stop you sending raw files with the Capture One little sidecar folder and doing it that way. But EIP is just a packaged raw file which has the raw file and adjustments. If you want to share that with somebody else using Capture One, that is the point of it. If you don't want to share your images with someone else using Capture One, then you don't really need to use EIP at all. It's as simple as that. Oliver says, does the opening of a session lead to doubling of the files? I usually work in system folders to save space. Well, it depends how you use the session really. If you're just browsing system folders, you're just using Capture One as a browser, which is fine, but you lose out on a lot of advantages of working with the session proper as such. But there is no doubling of files. But just remember the way I did it, I copied from an SD card, a memory card on the computer. So obviously I want to get those images off the memory card onto my computer. So rather than copying them onto the computer and then opening a session or whatever, why not just start a blank session of, you know, my holiday in France or whatever, and then just start from there and get them into the session without giving yourself an extra step as such. Jan says, is it possible to add project client sheet information for folder or files for overlay in Capture? Well, I guess you can add anything metadata. I mean, there's all kinds of metadata items based on that. So why not use the power of the metadata to add that into the images themselves? You could make a metadata on one. Let's say the creator is Jan Larson, for example. That's you. And then you can add in all the various different project data and so on, and then that could be in the images themselves. So if you ever searched your image database, then you could search on project and things like that. Alicia says, when you import images from a session folder on your hard drive, do those original images move from the folder, or does Capture One create a copy? If they're already on your hard drive and you import, it's copying them, it's not moving them. So if they're already on your hard drive and you want images in a nice packaged up session, it might make sense just to move them into the Capture folder. Yes, EIP will only open in Capture One. Chris says, can I change to a catalog I've started back to a session? No. A catalog is a catalog. It's a totally different way of doing it, but there's no reason why you couldn't. If you've got images in a catalog, it depends how many, really, Chris. It's kind of an open-ended question. So if you've got something tricky like that you need to do, don't forget you can always ask our support department to help you. You can always open a support ticket and say, look, I need to do this. Can you please show me how to do it? And they'd be more than happy to help. Capture Pilot and Sessions. Yes, you can use Capture Pilot with Sessions too. Works very, very nicely. We'll come to that. Let's just finish off our basic session workflow. So we've got some images in our selects folder. We've done some basic adjustments and things. So now let's say we wanted to output. And at this point, it makes a lot of sense to use the power of process recipes. So we've got 8 images right here that we've made some very quick adjustments to. And now we've got our various different process recipes up here. Now, by default, you'll see the top, I think it's 8 are included with Capture One, but you can make your own process recipe quite easily. Let's just delete a couple of old ones. So these are the basics ones that you have. So if you wanted your images to come out as TIFF 18-bit full size, we would select this recipe. If you wanted them out as JPEG full size 80% quality, then we would check this recipe additionally, because you can have more than one process recipe running at the same time. Let's just keep it simple in this example and have one output. So we're going to create TIFF 8-bit. Let's do JPEGs because they're processed a bit quicker. So we're going to have JPEG 80% quality, full size with the Adobe RGB space. How do we know that? Because if we look at the process recipe underneath, this is how the images are going to be interpreted. So JPEG 80%, Adobe RGB, fixed scale at 100%. Output naming is going to say the same, and the output location by default in a session is always the output folder. So if we click on the arrow here, then it's going to go into the output folder here, which is currently empty. We can change that if we wish, but as I said at the start, we're just using the session as it was designed to have captures, output, selects, and trash. So we won't do anything more fancy now. We'll leave that to the second example. And you can see the process summary down here. So if I select all images, Command A, and say process, then they start to process, and you get your process bar zipping along the side here. Now, if we go to our output folder, you can see the images start to pop in. Could you do a session on a cloud drive? Ton is asking. There's no reason why you couldn't. I would only say just test before you do it, because there has been a couple of situations I know with Google Drive, or when the syncing kicked in, that something went a bit strange. So I'd say don't go into a live job straight away. Just test it out, or try something like Dropbox as well. There's no reason why it shouldn't work. I successfully share a catalog with a colleague in the Netherlands, and that seems to work fine on Dropbox. I'd say just test before relying on it fully. So now, if we just summarize what we've got our capture folder with all our original captures that we imported in from our memory card. We had our selects folder where we chose 8 of our favorite images, which we then adjusted. we threw a couple away, which we didn't like. And then finally, we outputted them to our output folder as JPEGs on the recipe that we asked for. And then they are all there sitting nicely in the output folder. Anyone hungry? Like so. So that's the very, very sort of basic way to use a session. Now, the good thing is this session is all in one folder. So let's say I wanted to pass this off to someone else, I could send them the whole session. If I wanted to copy it to an external hard drive, I could just drag it across. If I wanted to move it from a laptop to a desktop computer, I could do so. If I wanted to use it, move it from Mac to PC, as Wolf was asking, then I could do so. So it makes it very easy to transport. Now, if I was to close this session, goodbye, and I wanted to open it again, I can just double click, and then it opens back up in Capture One as it was before. So that's just a really basic way to use a session. It's simple, isn't it? So yes, David, it's very, very simple to use a session in its basic sense. So if you're out and about working, let's just give you a few scenarios. If you're a wedding portrait photographer, have a session for every wedding that you do, because everything is then bunched up in that session. If you shoot portraits, have a session for every portrait sitting you do, because again, everything is in that place. If you just do sort of transport travel photography, you could have a folder for every location you visit and so on. What you can do is sort of integrate that with catalogs, and we won't get into that today, but what I can suggest is that if you go to our blog and you look up actually this post here, nope, not that post there, that's a different one. Let's sessions and catalogs. So I actually describe my workflow where I use sessions and catalogs. So if you think that's interesting, then have a look at that blog post. So blog.phase1.com, just search my name or just search the title, and then have a look at what I do there. Say there's probably not enough time to get into it today, but the benefit of what I do here is that I use sessions sort of on a temporary basis to get images into my computer, to make adjustments, to make outputs, to share them on social media, etc., etc. And once that session is kind of finished and everything's adjusted, I then archive it into my catalog. So that's the basic premise there. Okay, so let's go back to here. Somebody was asking, or is it, how do I make a name of the folder JPEG 80 in output? Good question. So let's just get rid of, I'm just going to delete those outputs for a second. We've got all our images here. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. If we keep it simple, in File, you can make a subfolder here, just of the recipe name. So you could say JPEG 80, for example, like so. Or what we could do, and we're going to get into this in a bit more of a deeper sense in here, output location, we can make a subfolder, and we can use something called a token. So if we click on this button here, we should find one called recipe name. So if we drag this token up here, say OK, then what we're going to have is the name of the recipe, sorry, a subfolder created automatically with a recipe name. So let's say I have JPEG and TIFF, like so. Let's run two recipes at the same time and then say process. Click on the arrow here as a shortcut. You can now see that we've got the JPEGs going in and the TIFFs going in, separated into their different folders. Is there a way to have several different selections for different needs? Yes, and I think we'll do that when we run through this again and we use a few more features, because there's all different ways that you can do that. How would you do it if you have it in different folders? Again, Mark, let's do that on the second session run through, and you'll see how that works. But just to finish this one, you can see all the JPEGs in there, all the TIFFs in there, split up automatically into different folders by using recipe name in the subfolder path there. Okay, so let's do this session again, but we'll use a few more features like separate folders, different ways of rating, different selections, and so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is let's do another new session. Tell you what, let's close that old session down. Let's say new session, and we call this webinar AM, what should we call it, webinar AM plus, and say OK. So nice brand new empty session like so. Just remind you, if we right click and look at it here, you can see we've got capture output selects trash, all empty, webinar co-session database, tells Capture One what it needs to know about this particular session. Let's go back to our import again, import files. We're going to import the same set of files and we're going to import them into the capture folder again, but this time we're going to throw in a bit of automation with regards to the subfolder here. Now, under subfolder, you can freehand type. So if you wanted to make a subfolder in capture folder, for example, raw, if I can spell, raw files, we can do so. And that will make a subfolder for me automatically. If I put a slash in, then we're going to go down a section on the folder tree and I can make another folder. So I can freehand type here if I wish, or we can use a token. So if we look here, there's 3 dots, click on this. We can drag and drop a token in here. So I'm going to go for image date. So the date the image was captured, because sometimes that's good to know or good to separate. You see it's currently month, day, year. If we click on the small arrow, we can change this to something that you're more familiar with. For me, that's day, month, year, how we do it. So that's going to make me a folder called raw files and then separate them out by their date as such. If you just want to separate them by the date, which we could do so, let's do that. Let's just keep it simple and we have it as image date like so and say OK. So the images are going into the capture folder, but they will get automated into a subfolder based on the date that they were captured with. We're going to leave everything else the same and click import all. Let's say import all like so. You see this message here. So it's created this an untitled album of this particular, get out of the way, of this particular import, because the images have been imported into various subfolders. But if we want to get back to this import of all the images in one click, then it's created us an album that shows us all the images, which you'll see in a minute. Let's say OK, OK. So if we go back here and we go back to our session, you'll see in capture, they've now been automatically split up into the dates that they were captured. Now, if I click on the capture folder, it looks empty because there are no images in the capture folder. There's subfolders. If we look in the untitled album, that shows me everything that we did on that last import. So that's what that pop-up message was all about. So basically showing me everything that we made on that last import. So if I go to the capture folder, of course, that's not very helpful because it's blank. If I right click and say show in system folders, then we can easily navigate, if I expand that out, our various different dates where you see where the images were captured like so. So they're essentially in different collections in different folders. Now, again, if you want to, you could use the selects folder. Sorry, excuse me 1 minute. Just was going to say, didn't want to burst your eardrums by sneezing into the microphone, so just had to mute myself there for a second. So we could use the selects folder, but then of course we won't have them bunched up in their date, so maybe that's not so useful. So we could do various other things that we tend to do in collections, is to use star ratings or color tags. You can do exactly the same in Capture One. You can either add a star rating by clicking on any of the dots down here, like so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops, I did a double click. Or you can simply use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the keyboard like so, or 0 to 0 it out. Or you can use color tags. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, pink, purple. There is shortcut keys for that too. So plus on the keyboard is green, minus is red, which I use as a reject if you like, and the star is yellow. And if you look at Capture One edit keyboard shortcuts, it's under, good question, where is it? I'm not sure. If we look at Oh, it's under adjustments, color tag. You can see the shortcuts there. If you want to change those, don't forget you can do that in Capture One. So if we go to Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, it's under Adjustments, Color Tag, none, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, pink. For none, I tend to use this shortcut Shift X if I want to get rid of a color tag. So if I've got this one, I can now say Shift X, and then that takes my color tag away as such. So you can do that quite nicely with the shortcut keys and so on. So let's say we were to just 5-star rate. Let's say that's 5. Let's call that 3. And we could go to our next folder. We could say, well, that's a 4. We could go to this one. That's a 5. Then we could go 3, 4, 5, 2, and so on. So you get the idea. So we can do various different ratings like this. 4-star, let's just go through and do everything. 5, 3, 3. Get some arbitrary numbers in there. Now, if you've got a lot and you want to kind of auto advance through it, we can do something quite nice in the filters tool. So let's say we're star rating. If we look in the filters tool and say, show me images that have no star rating, then obviously they're all going to show because they have no star rating. Now, if we go through and rate them, so if I press 5 on the keyboard, that disappears because it's obviously no longer a 0-star rating. So we can say 4, 4, 3, 3, 4, 5 for the stake, and so on. So that's an easy way of auto advancing through a bunch of pictures. I'll show that again. Say star rating none down here in the filters tool of the radio buttons. And then we could say 3, 5, 5, like so. So it's a good way of blasting through it. Mark is saying, I'm a fashion photographer. I shoot lookbooks, and what's the best method in sessions to set up for such shoots? Say 30 outfits. Currently, I have each outfit in a different session name. Oh, definitely not the way to do it, Mark. Remind me, I'll show you what you could easily do with a session to change that. It'd be way easier in a session just to have multiple capture folders with the different looks. Yes, Jan, you can print the shortcut summary. If you go to, where is it? Help, keyboard shortcut summary. Boom, there you go. You can then print that out and stick it next to your bathroom mirror to commit to memory forever. So now we've got our capture folders with various different images in at various different ratings. Now, what we can do is look at all these various different images, like all the 5-star images, all images, for example. That was everything we brought in there. So we could have various different smart albums or albums here. These are smart albums because they sort based on the image criteria. If you want to make a different smart album, let's click on the plus and say smart album, and we could say 3-star and above, for example. We can use a preset here, 3-star or higher. So the rating is greater than or equal to 3 stars. Let's say OK. So now if we look at 3-star and above, that shows me all images that are 3-star and above. If you want to make a basic drag and drop album, we can say plus. We can make an album here. We could call this, what do we say? Let's say ones that we want to print, for example. Then we could just simply drag and drop images to that album like so. So now we've got images in that album. That's all kind of virtual organization. Nothing is moving out of their current date folders. Everything is just all done virtually. If you want to, there's nothing to stop you making additional folders in the session if you wish. This session structure, capture, output, selects, trash, that's the basic structure. If you want to make another folder in here, if you wish, called selects number 2 or selects 3 or selects 4, you can just simply make it in the Finder. Just to make sure that the session is aware of it, you just need to drag and drop it into the favorites, because then it adds it to the database. So for example, if we wanted to have a folder in here like called selects from, what dates did we have? I can't remember. Type in here, selects from 01, 07, for example, then we could do. And if I drag that into the session favorites, selects from that, then there's nothing to stop me. If you see selects here, selects from 0107. If I wanted to, I could just drag and drop images to that. So this session structure, you can totally mess with this if you wish. Oh, didn't spell that right. Selects. This session structure you can totally mess with. So if you want to add multiple folders, in Mark's case, if you want multiple shop folders, you could do so, and so on. So the session structure as it is now is the basic state. You can add to that, as you saw we did with the capture folders here, with the selects folders and so on. So feel free to do that. Just remember, if you make a folder in the Finder, just drag it over to the session favorites. Then at least you can access it quickly here, or you can simply access it quickly down here as well. So we've done various things here. That was star rating. Remember, there's nothing to stop you doing color tagging as well, as I said earlier. We did some virtual organization with our session albums and so on. So what if we then wanted to, say, do an output and be a bit smarter as well with our various different outputs as well? So we've got all our 5-star images here. I won't bother going through adjusting them, but let's just say select all, and we go to our process recipe again, and we get a bit smarter here with the output location. Mark, fashion photographer, you're going to enjoy that. Sorry, Eric says same image in different select folders. No, you can have the same image in different albums because that's virtual. But if you want the same image in different selects folders, you're getting into very dangerous territory because you should not be duplicating your raw files. So if you want, say, this image here as one that you might like to print and one that's a selection for elsewhere, then don't physically duplicate the raw file. That's madness. Just use the virtual collections here. Because in this album, we've got those 3 to print, but there's nothing to stop me making another album, images for whatever, Instagram as an example. Then there's nothing to stop having the same image in 2 different folders like so. But do it virtually, don't duplicate images. So, sorry, slight digression. Just saw that question and that was important. So we want to output these, but let's do something a bit smarter with the output location. So let's have our TIFF and JPEG again. Let's go to our output location and let's first of all decide that we might like to output them based on the capture folders here. So in the output folder, we want this to be mirrored. So we want my outputs to be in the dates that the images were shot as well, for example. So what we can do is, excuse me, if we go to the 3 dots here, we can find something called session subpath, like so. Let's put that up there. So what this means is that if we see it here, is that if we click on this, our session subpath is going to go, see this image here is selected, it's going to go in the output folder in a subfolder with the date. Let's say we want to divide that up by further things. We could do rating. In this case, I've got all the 5-star ones picked, so let's pick more. Let's pick everything because that has various different star ratings. So let's say select all, go back here, and then go back into this. So let's do a slash. If you're on Windows, you have to do this slash. On Mac, it doesn't matter. Windows is picky. So let's do it by rating. So down here, you'll find something called rating. So that will give us a folder based on the star rating, like so. So session subpath. So that will give us the date, and then it will give us the rating as well of that particular image. So based on the star rating. So that's going to give us our date and the rating like so. Let's leave it at that, and let's. Oh, but we could also split by recipe name as well. So let's throw in. What do we want first? We want the date, and then let's have in here. Recipe name. You can search actually if you wish, or you can just scroll. So let's do recipe name. We'll sneak that in there, and then we put in our backslash here. So we're going to have the date, then we're going to have the recipe name, and then it will be split by rating, with me? You'll see in a minute. So we've got 22 images, 2 different recipes, bunch of stuff in here. Let's say process and see what happens. Oops, wrong folder. Let's do right click and go up here. So under output, so we've got the date, like so, and then we've got our JPEG and our TIFF, and then divided into the different star rating folders, like so. So we know that on 25th of June, if we go to this folder, this is our JPEGs, this is the 5-star one right here, and that's all automatic, of course. So now we get an output folder that mirrors perfectly the capture folder, and you can see as the process is going in, those folders are popping up. Mike says, if I remove a session from the library and wish to recreate it at a later date, how do I do that with adjusted images? Not quite sure what you mean by that, Mike. I mean, if you happen to in a webinar, sorry, in a session, not a webinar, I'm reading this. If you've got the raw files with their Capture One folder behind it, you've always got the adjustment data. So if you were to re-import those back into a session, there's a checkbox in the import window that says include existing adjustments. And if you do that, then stuff will be brought in with the adjustments. When this is finished processing, we have a lookup. And let's see. How do you mix up 2 different sessions without losing the settings? Again, I'm not sure I understand that question as well. I think Mark and Mike, keep things simple. Don't try to mix stuff up. I mean, the whole point of a session is that it's one session for each project. You shouldn't be mixing up various different sessions. They all have their own database, which you can open up into Capture One. So you're viewing one session at a time. You shouldn't really be mixing stuff up. If you stick to the sort of very, very basic, simple rules, then you shouldn't really have any issues at all. So again, under output, are we still processing? No, I think we've finished. So if we look at capture and output, they look exactly the same. And in the output date folder, again, we have our different process recipe. So then you see under TIFF, 5-star, that's our TIFF file with our 5-star rated images, all nicely automated. Before Capture One 8.2, I think we added this, or 8.1 came around, these additional tokens. All of this you would have to do manually. Could be very, very laborious. So Mark, who's the fashion photographer, what would he do? Well, basically, if we make a new session, and we call this Mark Fashion, because I'm sure there's a few of you who may do this, then you're going to have your very basic session like so. Let's actually look at this. Mark Fashion. Let's close these down. What I would say in your what did you say, Mark? You said you shot 30 different outfits. So under capture here, we would make a new folder and we would call this shot, if I could spell, shot 1 and so on. So we could do this in the Finder and so on. So this would be, let's just do it with a few, shot 2. And the good thing is I'll show you something else in a minute as well. Shot 3, you could call these whatever you like, but I would suggest you save this as a template so you don't have to do this kind of laborious stuff again. So we've got a capture folder with shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in it. This is your session. First thing we're going to do is drag those to the favorites like so. And let's have one called lighting test for when you're getting your eye in as such. Let's drag this to the favorites as well. So we've got our various different session favorites, our various different capture folders here because you're shooting tethered, I guess. But if you're not shooting tethered, there's nothing to stop you importing into the different folders as you wish. So the first thing we're going to say, if you were shooting tethered, you would make this by right-clicking and you would set that as the capture folder. Then all your shots are going in here. Once you've got your lighting sorted, you would go to shot 1, right-click, and set that as your capture folder. When you've done outfit 1, you would go to shot 2 and set that as the capture folder, and so on. And then you would shoot various images into the various different folders like so. I've actually got an example on this card nope, here we go, capture. So outfit 1. So if I just grab, say, a few of those, so that could be shot 1, this could be shot 2. Oh, come on, Finder. Yep, they went in. Outfit 3, bear with me. And then outfit 4. And then finally, outfit 5, like so. So now if we look here, we've got shot 1. Let's make these bigger. Shot 1, shot 2, shot 3, shot 4, shot 5, like so. So you've got all your various different looks in there in these various different folders, like so. If you want to, you can star rate those and so on, color tag, however you want to do it. And then at the end of the session, what we could do, if we just go to all images, we could select all. Let's say you were going to output everything, or you could filter by just the 5-star images. So let's say in each one you had a 5-star. So let's make this 5-star, this 5-star, this 5-star, this 5-star. So if we look at all the 5-star images, that's one outfit from each folder. Select all, go to what we did earlier. Let's say you just want to have a JPEG. And our output, we would go by session path, session subpath, like so. And then if you wanted to, no, that would be it, just session subpath. This is the case if you've only got one image, like one 5-star image from each one. Say OK, process, go to our output, and now you can see in output we've got shot 1, shot 2, shot 3. That was a bit fast, Mark, but you can watch that back again and see how that goes. But that's definitely the best way to do it. And yes, you could do that shooting tethered, as I said. And yes, you could also apply ratings and sort them in that way. It doesn't have to be star rating, it could be by color tag. So for example, if we wanted to export just the green, so shot 2, let's do it this way, green, shot 3, green, shot 4, green, shot 5, green, like so. We could then go to all images, filter by green down here, for example, if you wanted, do it that way. If you wanted to combine filters, let's say you had green for the full length and like blue for the close up and so on. And there's all kinds of different ways you can do it. You could combine filters by alt clicking over here, for example, alt click to combine different color filters. And then same thing applies again. You could select all. And then in the output here, session subpath, again, you could always do that by color. If I type in color, then choose color tag, then we could sort by color tag. So you could have shot 1 greens into one folder, shot 1 blues into a different folder, and so on. Hope that makes sense. Linda's saying, so basically you could use the session process on your laptop in the field to keep the project isolated, then import into your main catalog for back in the Office Studio for final processing. Yes, you could do as well. Yep, there's no reason why you couldn't do that. I should say in the output, I'm not sure if this is what you mean, Mark, but if we go and look at our output folder, that's also blank because they're in different folders, but we can say show in system folders. And then if you want to, you can look at the various different outputs in Capture One. And then if you wanted to do further stuff, you could right click and you could say open with Photoshop, for example, blah, blah, blah. And then if you wanted to do additional retouching work or whatever, I'm just going to do something stupid like a crop so we can see the difference. And then close that down and save it. Oops, say OK. Then what you'll see is Capture One will figure that out and then update the thumbnail as well. So you can, remember, right click, open with Photoshop, like so. And then you can start to do stuff. And again, this all stays nice and neat in the session as well. Alan says, when shooting tethered, do the images go to the SDCF card additionally? No. it doesn't. The way that we sort of tap into the camera is that we pull the data directly from the camera itself, not via the CF card. So the sort of CF or SD card write is disabled at that point. If you want to back up, which is I assume why you're asking, is then use something like Chrono Sync. Something like ChronoSync as an example. There's lots of other applications like it that can watch a folder and keep it updated, backed up, either when you tell it to or every time there's a change, every 2 minutes or whatever. So then you could just simply watch the capture folder and get that running. That's far better do it than trying to worry about writing to the SD/CF card at the same time. How are we doing for time? We're nearly at the end. So just to recap, I hope that gives you an idea of what you can do with a session. Let's just open the first one. So remember, in the very simple sense, we can simply use capture, selects, and output, and our trash, don't forget. Not doing anything fancy, just pretty much leaving the session at its most basic structure, as we can see here. Or we can go up a gear and start to use different things in the import process, like the subfolder, automated subfolders on date, for example. Incidentally, if you just browse what you can do, you can split by camera serial number, for example. So if you shoot weddings and you shoot with 2 different cameras and you want to keep them separate, that's an easy way to do it. As I said, date, current date, image date, by lens, by aperture, by all kinds of stuff. But I think most of us will use the common ones like image date, different camera serial numbers, and so on. So we can, at the import process, split our images up in an intelligent way. We can use virtual. Let's open R+. We can use virtual organization to sort of help sort images. We can use star rating. We can use color tags. Don't forget, you can expand the session structure into any way you feel. For someone like Mark, who shoots fashion, it makes sense to have a session which looks something like this, divided up into various different shot folders, which can be mirrored in output, and then sorting further by star rating, color tag, and so on as you wish. The possibilities are sort of endless with the automatic generation of folders on output done in the output location down here. Again, subpath. So session subpath, and then we can do stuff again like camera serial numbers, color tag, various stuff about the project. So if you use metadata terms, you could divide up images based on the projects, all kinds of stuff. Just have a look down that list to see what you can do. The last thing to mention for Mark and so on is if you're going to use this kind of session structure regularly, lighting test shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on, the best thing to do is say File, Save as a template. So if I were to save this session as a template, let's call this Fashion Basics, like so. And then if we said New Session, call this another Fashion Shoot, and then use our template here, Fashion Basics, and say OK. What happens is that when the session is created, it comes in already with those folders created. If we look at the session structure, you'll see under capture, we've got all those folders like so. So you don't have to create them each time. The template will also remember various things about naming convention, next capture adjustments, things on Capture Pilot, all kinds of stuff. So once you've got your session set up, save it as a template, then you'll never have to do that kind of boring stuff again, basically. Okay. Yes, Mark, you can, if you want to choose, if we go back to this, you can do edit with. So you can do, if we're in the capture folder, you can right click and say edit with, and then that will generate your TIFF, and then you can do it in Photoshop. But that's, I think that's slower, to be honest, because you can only sort of run one process type on one image at a time. So why not process them all first and then open them up in Photoshop? But that also works too. You can process as TIFF or JPEG. Let's say we wanted this as a TIFF, say edit variant. It'll get processed. It will pop up into Capture One. We could then edit it somehow. Close that. And then what happens this case is that it puts the image alongside the original RAW in the capture folder. If that's fine for you, then that's a way to do it as well. Okay, yes, so hopefully Lopez, you've just seen that. Okay, unfortunately, we've run out of time, so sorry if I didn't get to all of your questions. There was rather a lot of you. Just so you know what's happening next week, we've got a webinar called How Far Can You Go in Capture One? And that's just, well, what I'm going to do is run through 2 or 3 image examples where we start at the very basic bare bones of the image and do as much as we can in Photoshop, sorry, in Capture One, not Photoshop, do as much as we can in Capture One to the image without the need necessarily for going to Photoshop. So really an exercise in how much can you really do in Capture One in terms of even repairing parts of the image, getting the right colors, perspective adjustments, and so on without the need to move to Photoshop. So that's the plan for next week. If you want to sign up for that, just look out for the link in the follow-up email, which you'll get in 1 or 2 days' time, which also has the YouTube playlist where this recording will be in a few days' time as well. So look out for that. So sorry if I didn't get to your particular question in time. There was rather a lot of you, but hopefully most of your questions were answered. If you do have an issue, don't be afraid to contact support. So if you go to the support pages on phase1.com, make a support ticket, you'll get a reply normally within 24 hours. You're all entitled to free support, so don't be shy. Please use it to get your questions answered, which you might not have done so here. Okay, many thanks for your time and hope to see you all again soon. Take care.